So howdy. What's the blurb without Behind the Blurb, you know? And I'm very excited for this one because we have a member who was initially an associate producer for the blurb, and while they're not on the show anymore, they still come back as an honorary guest. So everyone, please give a warm welcome to Fennel D.
Hi. Happy to be here, I think.
I mean, we're all very happy you're here as well, even though you don't have a full-time position anymore. When you do come back, you always make the blurb a great time, without a doubt. So with that in mind, as I have for any other person who I brought here, I have some fabulous questions here for you. So let's take it back to when you first joined the blurb. What made you want to join the blurb in the first place?
So I actually started more with joining ASG. I wasn't ever officially on ASG, but I had a crush on the current producer of the blurb, and I started loitering around ASG until Tony, old entertainment director of TV2, was like, hey, do you want to come down and watch the show? Because I had made t-shirts. Like, if you see people walking around with the blurb in the ASG t-shirts, I made those. And Tony let me come down and hang out, and that was the last episode of that semester. So then I just started coming back, and I would hang out with people here, and then I started coming to the blurb, and that wasn't when I had like an official role. I would just kind of like hang out. But then last semester when Jenica was solo producing, they asked me if I could be an associate producer because they needed help. And I was like, sure. And I did that first semester, and I didn't dislike it. It's just like a lot of work for me on top of everything else that I have going on. And it's hard for me to like come every week and like give energy and knowing that I have to be there. But when I'm asked to help with things, I don't really have a problem with that. So that's why I still show up. Plus, I made a lot of friends since I was just like hanging out that I really missed seeing. So for a while at the beginning of this semester, I wasn't really coming as much. And then I was like, God, I miss seeing people. So I've been trying to come more consistently.
Yeah. And, you know, it's always good that when you do, because it just brings us joy. And that actually leads me right into the following question. Even though you don't have a full-time position on the blurb anymore, what makes just the blurb in general just so fun to come back every once in a while?
So the main thing is that there's a lot of people on the blurb that I wouldn't get to see otherwise. Specifically, this one goes out to Jen. I love Jen. I always love seeing Jen. I love seeing everybody else, but I never get to see her unless I come to the blurb.
Right.
And I also, when I go to if I go to like a different show, I usually have to like hang out in like the actual studio opposed to like the booth and sitting in the booth. I love all of our tech people. We don't like on the blurb, you don't see your tech people, but I love them each individually very deeply. So.
Yeah. You know, shout outs to our production. Honestly, you guys are really what makes this possible. Yeah. So with that in mind, keeping things on the realm of the blurb, what is your favorite like blurb memory or favorite just thing that has happened on the blurb?
I'm trying to think. I always really love the senior goodbyes. I don't have like a specific one in mind, but every time I've done one since I've been coming, it's always something that I've really enjoyed because it's like the last hurrah with people that you really love. So especially last semester, there was a lot of people that left that I really liked having around, and it's really nice to kind of be able to give them that closure and that goodbye, especially as I'm going to be leaving this semester.
And we can count on seeing a senior goodbye from you at the end of this semester, correct?
Mm-hmm. I think so, if I'm invited to do one, if I'm allowed.
I mean, I believe with Jenica producing, I don't see why not. Well, switching away from the blurb a little bit, if we're talking about music, we the Blurb know that one of your favorite bands is Train.
Mm-hmm.
So with that in mind, what is your favorite Train like song?
So my favorite Train song is actually Drops of Jupiter, and there's a story behind it which is kind of sad, but my aunt died 2 years ago at the beginning of the fall semester, and it was like really sudden and really abrupt. It was an accidental death, and we had to wait for my cousin, her daughter, to fly in from California. So there was like 48 hours where my aunt was on life support in the hospital. And this was in Canton, so me and my dad and my family members had to keep driving back and forth to Canton a lot. And the one day we went down and my cousin was like completely distraught. And it was because my aunt really liked music. She was a big music person, and one of her favorite bands was also Train. And when he was kind of like trying to say goodbye to her, his phone started playing Drops of Jupiter without him prompting it. Like, it just started playing on his phone, and he couldn't get it to shut off until the whole song had played through. And the thing is that like that song's about a lot of like, it's about death, and it's about like letting go, and it's about love. So it's very meaningful for me that way, because it kind of felt like my aunt giving us the ability to like let her move on.
Yeah, and that's really deep. Like I know that Drops of Jupiter in general is just a very special song, and I think it's great that you have that connection with that song and with that band. And quick fun fact, actually, I'm not sure if you've seen, but this is actually prompting me to remind you because I'm wearing my REO Speedwagon shirt, because as you know, Train and REO Speedwagon are going on tour this summer. But fun fact, on the Jimmy Kimmel show, Train and REO Speedwagon were on there, and they actually did a mashup of Drops of Jupiter and REO Speedwagon's song Keep On Lovin' You.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if you've seen that.
I haven't seen it, but I've heard.
Yeah, like I recommend checking it out. It was very special. I teared up a little bit when I watched it. And so I guess on the realms of Train, I also wanted to ask you this. Have you ever sailed across the sun?
Not yet, but I'd like to.
Do you hope to make it to the Milky Way and see the lights all faded?
Probably.
And you think you might fall for a shooting star?
I
Particularly
already
one.
have.
Was it one without a permanent scar?
Yeah.
Yeah, you probably missed me while you were looking for yourself out there. So I guess for my next question, much like Jenica, you are also in the realms of theater for your major, more on lines of theater production, and I know you do costuming and stuff like that. So I wanted to ask, what's your favorite costume that you've developed for theater production?
So last semester I did my senior capstone, which is basically like a culminating project. And for me that meant making 2 dresses for Cabaret, which was the show that we did, the last show we did last semester. And for that show I made 2 dresses that were supposed to be fit on 3 people for both the MC and Sally Bowles, that would be worn during 2 or 3 different scenes. One was during a song, which is escaping me right now. But it's basically there are 2 ballads after the main character has kind of her fall from grace. And I had to pattern and make this very sheer, like organza garment for the one character, and then for the other character I was supposed to make that dress but in like a nicer fabric that was they were supposed to mirror each other on stage, so it was the same pattern, but I had to make them in 2 different sizes and make sure that they both fit and read as the same dress even though they were going to be fundamentally different. And I really liked that process. It was a lot of work because it was my capstone, so I had to write like a 20-page paper about it. But I think that that's probably one of the highest quality things I've ever made, because the fabric was so sheer that we couldn't backstitch, which is how you keep the threads from unwinding when you sew fabric. So we had to hand tie all of them. And then because the fabric was so sheer, we had to French seam all of it, which is just a fancy type of seaming that keeps your edges from fraying and coming apart. That's often used on sheer garments. So it was a really long process, but it was very rewarding. So.
Yeah, that sounds like it took a long time.
Yeah, I think I started it in like September, and I think we finished around October. So.
Oh, I mean, that was a shorter span of time than I'm expecting. But then again, I'm sure you've kind of experienced in this already.
Yeah.
I'm sure if I were to make a dress, I probably wouldn't make it done until probably the next decade.
Yeah.
And is there any closing remarks that you have?
No. I've just really enjoyed being on the blurb and being around, and I'm glad that you let me do one, even though I'm not really a cast member or an AP anymore.
Well, I mean, you still make occasional appearances, and I think just and the excitement that you bring to everybody when you do show up alone warrants it. So we had to. We realistically had to.